And so putting him on there, one, Dana White's an incredible operator. He's a great CEO, and he's built an amazing business in terms of entertainment, et cetera. And I bet there's a lot of technology and AI, et cetera, that's coming to that business. And so he'll be a great resource. But he also is very close to Donald Trump, and he really understands and has his finger on the pulse of what society is doing. And so Zuck is not just talking, he's taking actions here. And then the second thing that he's doing is he's moving some of the teams out of California to Texas. Now, he said, I think, I can't remember if he said perception of bias or to remove bias, but it is very clear that politicians overplayed their hand as well. And so it goes back to America was built on taking risk. It was built on giving people freedom, and it was built on government being small and out of the way.
Yeah, but
that's not what happened over the last couple of years. And now the internet and these digital natives are going to take that back.
But do you know what I kind of think about all this like culture shift and vibe shift, as you call it, is that it's almost like the cool girl effect. It used to be very cool. Like you gained social capital by canceling people and by being someone to point fingers and say, oh, they did this. And did you see their Twitter history and like all this stuff? Like that used to be cool.
Only with nerds and losers.
Well, right. But that used to be considered the cool thing to do. Now that's out of style. And now the cool thing is like common sense. So I think that where you place the cool factor, that's what's gonna grow. Well,
and also the media and others, they pioneered the cancel culture playbook and they taught it to the people on the internet, and now the people on the internet can weaponize it back. And so now what they do is, you can see this, right? If you say dumb things, we have a voice too. And really the entire power dynamic was based on previously, we as the media have a voice, we as the platform have power, you as an individual are susceptible to our rules. Again, this is something that I very, very intimately understand. We've had videos taken down. We've been censored. We have had tons of issues, banking wise, etc. Right? And generally, we're not that controversial. We're not that, doing anything too crazy. There are people who are way more controversial that deal with this on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking about over a decade, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 incidents. But there are people who've dealt with this every single week. There are people who still are kicked off the platform. And I go back and I constantly remind people that if you want to see ultimately how the future will play out, the number one thing that I will keep reminding people of in the digital age is that eventually the people's voice will be heard. You can trick them. You can slow them down. You can provide friction. You can do all stuff. But eventually, the people's voice will be heard. And the people's voice has been heard. They put the president they wanted into the White House. They pushed back, and they've got people to cave on the platforms, right? Free speech is making a comeback. The people's voice is now being implemented. It took a long time. There's a lot of people's careers that got derailed. There's a lot of people who had to kind of fight the fight. But ultimately, the people's voice is prevailing. And I think that is going to be a huge theme of the next 10 to 15 years.
All right. Let's talk about the people's voices not prevailing. Congestion pricing was introduced in New York City on Sunday after a late attempt by officials in New Jersey to stop it in court failed. The measure, which charges many drivers $9 to enter Manhattan during peak hours, is intended to bring relief to the country's most populated city. According to traffic data analysis, New York had the worst traffic in the world in 2023. Drivers lost 101 hours to traffic during peak commuting times. Is this really about traffic, or is this about collecting some money?
Today's episode is brought to you by Gemini. The future is being built today, and the future of currency isn't dollars, euros, pounds, or yen. It's crypto. And Gemini thinks that's a great thing, because a future where money is decentralized, inclusive, and globally accessible, that's a future that we are anxious to be a part of. Gemini teamed up with futurists, technologists, and designers like award-winning artist Matt Griffin, known for his illustrations for Dune, to craft a vision of the future with crypto at its core. The creative theme, Go Where Dollars Won't, emphasizes exploration, growth, and the crypto market's limitless potential. Whether it's going on that Martian safari to capture an unforgettable photo of a herd of woolly mammoths grazing the red planet, or using Bitcoin to pay for your lift pass to go strata skiing down the mountain peak of a breathtaking comet. Whatever adventures we'll be living, one thing is for sure. In a future this fantastic, the limits of traditional currency simply cannot keep up. Financial innovation will usher in this new frontier, and so go where dollars won't. with Gemini. Go check them out at gemini.com/go where dollars won't. Again, go check it out at gemini.com/go where dollars won't. Well, there's a couple of things that are worth paying attention to. The reason why every single person in the United States should pay attention to this is because the New York City is the first city in the country to implement a congestion tax. This is coming to the rest of the country.
You think so?
It's in Europe.
I mean, Atlanta's got
it's
they
in
got
Europe.
some congestion.
It is coming to the other cities in America. Once it is implemented,
Wait, it is in Europe?
Yeah. This is the New York City did not invent this. They borrowed this from other places. They've now implemented it. Other cities are going to start asking themselves, should we do it? The second thing I'm going to say is that whoever created the terminology congestion tax is a moron. Just call it a toll.
Yeah.
Right? People are used to paying tolls. The second you put tax in the name, of course people are going to freak out. Stop taxing me. Stop taxing me, right? No tax without representation. It's literally built into the DNA of this country. But tolls is really what this is, because it's not just during peak hours. You have to pay whether it's at midnight, you have to pay on weekends, you have to pay during the week. They just implemented a toll. Okay.
And it's also not just to enter the city. It's if you want to go uptown.
Basically, they just implemented this thing where anywhere below 60th Street, right, you got to pay. Now, here's what people are not talking about is, yes, that is the actual thing that the government implemented. How are companies like taxis, Uber, Lyft, et cetera, doing this? Taxi drivers, recently I talked to one, and he said every single time you get in the taxi, it used to be $4. That's the flat fee. Now it is going to be $4.75. He showed me it's $4.75. That 75 cents difference is what the taxi companies are putting on every single ride to make up for the $9 a day tax. On top of that, Uber and Lyft, they now are adding some to every single ride as well. And so you don't end up just paying the $9. What happens is every single time you take a ride, you are going to pay some of this on these ride sharing services or in taxis. So if you go back and you look at this, my number one problem with the entire situation is that they estimate they're going to raise $500 million to do this, right? If everything plays out how they say they're going to get $500 million. Every year, the MTA loses out on $700 million by allowing people to jump over the turnstiles.
I don't know if they allow it.
Well, what else would you call it where this has been happening for years? Why is it that when I go to certain news organizations, they have the equivalent of a turnstile, but guess what they have? It's not just a rotator one that I can easily jump over. Instead, it's these doors. They pop. They're fully closed.
Costs money.
Nearly impossible to jump over, right? Then they open, you walk through. You see this at airports, etc. Again, maybe it costs money, but again, it goes back to if you actually want to stop the bad behavior, there are solutions. The solution is not, oh, screw it, let the people keep jumping over the turnstiles and let's take the money from the good actors. You're punishing good people because the bad people are getting away with doing bad things. So why don't we, again, common sense, go after the bad people and stop punishing the good people? And then how stupid do you have to be if you have an area where there is commerce happening to try to deter people from going to the area of commerce?
Yeah, very dumb. I mean, what are all the businesses above 60th Street saying?
You mean below 60th Street?
Oh, sorry.
They fought it.
Below 60th Street.
Yeah, they fought it for a while. So there's something called the Partnership for New York City. Kathy Wild runs that organization. She's a fantastic woman, very well connected. I think probably one of the most important people in New York City. And she pushed back a lot on the congestion tax on behalf of her members because at first it was going to be $15. So here's a very interesting idea, which is if somebody could actually fix the MTA's budget, they spend over $19 billion. They have more than 74,000 employees. If you can't find $500 million of savings in a $19 billion budget, we need new people running the MTA, right? And so ultimately this congestion tax is not a thing about New York City. New Yorkers will figure it out, right? People in the tri-state area will figure it out. But this is something that now is going to come to the rest of the country. And it's because ultimately these cities, this infrastructure, they're broke. They are bankrupt. They cannot operate. And so either we put people in positions that can actually operate these things and make them sustainable, or we are going to have the state and federal governments have to keep funding this stuff. And so what does that do? It puts immense pressure on the national debt. It devalues the currency and ultimately, again, hurts the people because the ones who are holding cash end up being the ones who have their currency devalued away. And so it goes from, if you want to solve this problem in the United States, you got to have the politicians in Washington stop spending like idiots. And then you got to have people at the individual, local, state level who can actually run these organizations and say, we're not going to run at a loss. We're not going to keep dipping into the state or federal piggy bank because we can't figure out how to take $19 billion a year and run this organization.
Yeah.
And then my favorite part is that the firefighters, they came out and they said, our members used to drive their personal vehicles into New York City to take on extra shifts, to provide more coverage, to do all this stuff.
It has ripple effects, right?
Our members are no longer going to drive their personal vehicles. They've told us they're not going to do it. So we're going to have to buy vans with taxpayer money to go pick up our members because this tax is onerous on them. So again, this is a blanket tax. There's no, policemen, firemen, paramedics, they don't have to pay the tax. I saw a story that said if you have a funeral hearse taking a dead body, you got to pay the tax. Right? So everyone gets treated the same, which on one hand, okay, got it. Everyone gets treated the same. But on the second hand is, well, if all of a sudden the firefighters aren't driving in, we might not like that, right? What are the repercussions to that? And so there's all of this complexity around this thing, but ultimately this is an example of you have politicians who are implementing a really, really dumb idea because they are simply trying to play math where rather than say, how do we get more money, they should be saying, how do we spend less with abuse, fraud, and inefficiency? And if they were better at the spending part, they wouldn't need to drive more revenue. But ultimately, they don't know how to do that. And so the only thing they know how to do is add more tax.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at these tolls to enter the congestion zone, and it's a lot of money. Because
it's like $500 a month, approximately, depending on how many days you come in, etc. So the average worker now has to pay, if you drive your car,
crazy.
you have to pay $500 extra a month, which is $6,000 a year. I don't do public math, but I think that's right. And so from there, then you get, what if somebody gets paid $120,000 pre-tax?
Yeah.
And let's just say that they pay $30,000 in taxes. They're paying the tolls with post-tax dollars. All of a sudden you start saying, wait a second here. These people are paying high single-digit percentage of their take-home pay for a tax.
And if you think about it, the people coming into the city, many of them, work normal jobs. It's not like you're taxing the billionaires.
Of course.
It's crazy.